My wolf had been quiet for 4 years. Not absent, I want to be clear about that. He was still there, a weight in the chest the way a stone is a weight, present and cold and going nowhere. He simply did not stir. 4 years since Myra died in the fever that took half the Caldenmere lowlands in a single winter, and in all the time since the councils, the hunts, the succession ceremonies, the women my advisors brought to the hall with their careful smiles and their good bloodlines, my wolf had offered nothing. Not a flicker. Not the faintest pull. I had begun, quietly, to accept that he was done with the business of choosing. That was fine. I had a pack to run. I had the lowlands to rebuild and an eastern border that had not stopped testing us since before Myra was in the ground. I had Aldrich, my second, who laughed too easily and who I trusted with my life. I had Counselor Drest, who did not laugh at all and who I also trusted with my life, though more grudgingly. I had work. I had enough. What I did not have, as the solstice rite approached, was anyone who knew the old songs. This is a more significant problem than it sounds, if you are not of the wolf pack tradition. The solstice rite is not merely ceremony. The old songs, the ones that go back before written records, before the hold itself was built, before any of the current families could trace their blood, are what Caldenmere packs in the land. They are sung at the rite and the land responds. The moor stays green, the fen water stays clean. The wolves know their territory the way they know their own heartbeat. 3 generations of Caldenmere alphas had let the songs go quiet, passing only fragments down, and this year I had discovered that even those fragments were wrong. The pack's song keeper had died in the same fever as Myra. No one had replaced him. We had been running on faulty memory ever since, and the moor, my land steward told me, was beginning to show it. So I sent for one. The Guild of Song Keepers is small and not particularly concerned with rank. They go where the songs are needed and they charge accordingly, and they are, as a profession, not easily impressed by an alpha's title. I knew this. I had dealt with them before in the first years of my reign. What I had not anticipated was the specific song keeper the guild sent me. Her name was Wren. I first saw her in the outer courtyard, standing in the middle of the flagstones with her traveling pack still on her back, looking up at the walls of Ashenvale Hold with the calm, assessing expression of someone evaluating a problem. Not awed, not nervous. I was watching from the upper gallery. I often walked there in the early morning before the council day began, and I saw her turn slowly in place, studying the stone, the height of the walls, the way the courtyard narrowed toward the gate. Then she opened her mouth and sang 4 words. Just 4 words. I did not recognize them. They were old tongue, older than anything we'd been singing, and they were not loud. She was testing the echo. The sound bounced once off the south wall and came back to her, and she nodded, apparently satisfied, and adjusted the strap of her pack. My wolf sat up. I stopped walking. It is difficult to explain, if you have not felt it, what it is like when a wolf that has been stone still for 4 years suddenly moves. It is not comfortable. It is like a muscle you forgot you had suddenly clenching. I stood there on the gallery with my hand on the cold stone railing, and my wolf, awake, attentive, oriented like a compass finding north, pointed himself without apology at the woman in the courtyard below. I told him silently to settle. He did not settle. I went downstairs and met her in the hall where Aldrich had directed her, a long room off the main corridor that we used for assemblies when the great hall was too large. She had put her pack down and was walking the perimeter, pressing her palm flat against the stone walls, listening to something only she could hear. "Songkeeper Wren," I said. "Give me a moment," she said, without looking at me. Aldrich behind me made a sound I chose to ignore. I gave her a moment. She finished the perimeter, pressed both hands against the far wall, and nodded. Then she turned, looked at me with clear brown eyes, and said, "7 days is tight. If the songs have been done wrong for as long as you've said, there will be corrections that feel unnatural to the pack. People resist that. Are you going to back me up, or are you going to let your elders override me when they insist the old version sounded different? I'll back you up, I said. Good, she picked up her pack. I'll need the full company for 3 hours each morning and 2 each evening. I'll need you there at least twice. The Alpha's presence helps the pack accept corrections. I'll need a room near the hall, not across the hold, because I'll be up before dawn. And I'd appreciate it if your people didn't treat me like I'm made of glass. I'm not delicate. I just know old songs. I looked at her for a moment. Is there anything you need that isn't a demand? She considered this. Dinner, she said. I was on the road since yesterday. Behind me, Aldrich made the sound again. I still chose to ignore it. She began the next morning. I was not there. I had a border report to review and 3 separate complaints from the Eastern Holdings that had piled up over the week, and I was not, I told myself, going to rearrange the governance of a pack of 3,000 wolves because a hired songkeeper had a voice that made my long-dormant wolf sit up. That was a reaction. Reactions settle. I was 4 years past the age of letting my wolf run my schedule. I reviewed the border reports. I heard the singing through 2 stone walls. Even muffled by distance, it was, I am going to say something that sounds ridiculous, and I am going to say it anyway because it was true. It was like a weight lifting from the hold. Not dramatically, not all at once. Like a window being opened in a room that has been shut too long. The stone of Ashenvale, and I am an alpha, and I feel my territory the way I feel my own body. The stone seemed to breathe differently. My wolf pressed against my ribs like a large, patient animal leaning on a gate. I reviewed the border reports for another hour. Then I went to the hall. Wren was in the center of the room with 40 of the pack's best singers ranged around her in a rough circle. She was not singing now. She was speaking, moving her hands in a slow, specific rhythm, and the singers were trying to match the pattern with their voices. Most of them were getting it wrong. She was patient about this in a specific way, not soft, not apologetic, but matter-of-fact, the way a craftsman is patient with a material that is simply behaving according to its nature. She had not noticed me in the doorway. Not the vowel, she was saying to a senior singer, a man named Torv who had been with Caldenmere for 30 years and who did not take correction from anyone easily. The vowel is fine, the weight of the breath. Hear the difference, and she sang the phrase again twice, with the weight in different places, and the difference was immediately obvious even to me. Torv tried it. Yes, she said immediately, and there was a warmth in her voice that had not been there before, not enthusiasm exactly, but the genuine pleasure of hearing a thing done right. Hold that, don't change it. My wolf, so help me, made a small sound in my chest. I stepped back before she could turn around and see me in the doorway. I had a hold to run. I left. The second day, I stayed longer. I told myself this was appropriate. She had said she needed my presence to help the pack accept corrections, and that was a reasonable administrative request, and I was fulfilling it. I stood near the back of the hall and I watched her work, and I tried to think about the border report. I noticed things in spite of myself. The way she listened, not just with her ears but with her whole body, turning slightly when she heard something that interested her, going very still when something was wrong. The way the pack slowly reorganized itself around her, not through any obvious authority, but because they kept wanting to be where they could hear her clearly. Old Torv, by the second hour, had moved himself to a position directly to her left, which was exactly where she had told him to be, and he seemed to have arrived there of his own accord. And the songs themselves. I had grown up with the fragments. I knew what we'd been singing, or thought I did. These were not the same, not different in a way I could easily articulate. The words were largely the same, the shapes of the melodies were recognizable. But there was something in the structure, in the breathing and the weight and the specific way the phrases fit against each other, that made the room feel different when they were done correctly. Fuller. Rooted. When she sang, really sang, demonstrating a full passage, the light in the hall seemed to change. I do not know how else to put it. My wolf sat against my ribs and did not move, and did not stop being aware of her. After the morning session she came to find me. I had retreated to a bench along the wall, going through correspondence, and said, without preamble, "You have a bass section that's been singing a grace note on the wrong syllable for what I'd estimate is at least a generation. That's the primary thing causing the drift in the Eastern Territorial lines. We need to fix it by day 4, or we won't have it stable enough for the right." "The Eastern lines," I said, "that's a song problem." "Most territorial boundary problems in older packs are song problems," she said. "The songs do real work. That's not metaphor." She said it without impatience. She seemed genuinely surprised that she needed to explain it. "What did you think they were for?" "Tradition," I said. She looked at me as though I'd said something mildly sad. "The old ones aren't just tradition. They're a technology, one people forgot they had." She picked up her notes from the bench beside me. "Thank you for coming this morning. It helps. The pack is more settled with you in the room." She walked away. My wolf watched her go with an attention that was beginning to feel less like a reaction and more like an opinion. The third morning, Aldrich found me in the hall. He came in quietly, which was not his default mode, and stood beside me for a long moment watching Wren guide the pack through a complex call-and-response sequence. Then he said, in a voice pitched low enough that only I could hear, "Your wolf is showing." I kept my eyes on the session. "I don't know what you mean." "Your posture," he said. "When she sings, you do this thing." "Aldrich, I'm just noting it." "Note it somewhere else." He was quiet for a moment. Then carefully, "It's not a bad thing, Oren." "She's a hired songkeeper," I said. "She leaves on the 8th day. Drop it." He dropped it. He also, I noticed, came back the next 2 mornings, not to help with the singing, to watch me not react to the singing. This is what it means to have a second who has known you for 20 years. There is no privacy. Here is the thing I did not want to be true. That became progressively harder to argue with as the days went on. My wolf was not reacting to her the way he had reacted to anything in 4 years. He was not reacting to her the way he had reacted to anything, full stop. Because what I felt when Myra and I first found each other, I was young and the bond hit like a storm and there was nothing subtle about it. 16 years of marriage had mellowed it into something deeper and quieter, and then the fever had taken her. And after that, there was nothing. What I felt now was different in quality. It was not a storm. It was a persistent, a held note. The wolf in my chest pressed gently and constantly toward her, the way a compass presses toward north. Not urgently, not wildly, but completely. As though the direction simply was not negotiable. On the 4th day, I asked Drest, who was old enough to have heard things I hadn't, whether there was any record of a bond forming to someone outside the pack. He looked at me for a long moment over his reading spectacles. "There are records," he said. "It was more common in the early generations before territories hardened. The songs move pack bonds, you know, they always have. There's a reason the right opens the ground." He paused. "Who?" "No one," I said. "Historical question." He looked at me for another long moment. "The songkeeper is very good," he said, very neutrally, and went back to his reading. On the 5th day, she found me before the morning session. The light was still gray in the corridor, early enough that the hold was quiet, and I was coming from the gate where I'd gone to clear my head in the cold air. She was coming from her room with her notes under her arm and a cup of something hot, and she nearly walked directly into me. She stepped back, steady on her feet. "Sorry," she said, "I wasn't looking." "Neither was I," said, which was not precisely true. She was close enough that I could see the faint shadows under her eyes. She had said she was up before dawn, and I believed her. Up to work. Up because the solstice rite was in 2 days, and she took it seriously, this work of hers. The way people take seriously the things they genuinely love. "Are you all right?" I said. I did not know why I asked that specifically. She looked at me a little surprised. "Yes, I just needed quiet for a minute. The hall echoes even when no one's singing." She paused. "You come out early too." "I always have," I said, "since before I stopped." She didn't fill it in or look at me with that specific careful expression people use when they are aware of the dead. She just nodded, as if early mornings needed no explanation, which in my experience is rare. We stood in the cold corridor for a moment. "The bass line is holding," she said. "Torv really has it now." I was worried about him. "He doesn't like to be corrected." "He doesn't like to be wrong," she said. "Different thing. Once he heard the difference, he wanted it fixed. He just needed to hear it." She looked at her notes. "The right will be good, I think. The songs want to come back. The hold is responsive. I don't always get that. Some places have gone too far and it's just going through the motions. But here the land still knows what it's supposed to feel." "It was good land once," I said. "We let some things go that we shouldn't have." She looked up at me. Something in the way she looked at me then, direct and quiet, and not performing anything, made my wolf press forward with a certainty that I found it genuinely difficult to stand still through. "The songs are fixable," she said. "You just needed someone to come and do it." A small pause. "I'm glad it was me. It's a good hold. It feels right." She went down the corridor. My wolf watched her go. I stood there for a while after in the early light, with the cold stone under my hand and a compass in my chest that had only one direction. The 6th day, the day before the rite, she ran the full rehearsal from beginning to end. All 300 of the pack's voices. The great hall, which we had not used for a solstice rite in Myra's lifetime because the old songs were too degraded to work properly there. She had the company arranged in the old formation. She'd found it in a book she'd carried with her, a hand-copied record that was older than the hold's own archives. And she stood at the center, not elevated on any platform, and she sang the opening phrase. 300 wolves joined her. I cannot explain what it was like to stand in that hall and hear the Caldenmere pack sing the real songs for the first time in 3 generations. The stone resonated. The floor resonated. I felt it through my boots, through my hands on the nearest pillar, felt it move through the hold the way a struck bell moves through the air around it. 300 wolves and outside. I know this sounds like the kind of thing people say in stories and do not mean literally. Outside, the pack's wolves, the ones who ran the moor, went suddenly and entirely silent. Aldrich was beside me. I heard him let out a breath. And Ren was at the center of all of it, her eyes open, following the pattern of sound with her hands moving in those deliberate shapes, and her voice was the thread through the whole piece, the one the others followed, and my wolf. My wolf had had enough of being patient. He did not surge, he did not howl, he simply stopped pretending to be contained. The bond, and I could not call it anything else now, I was done lying to myself, was not subtle. It was not a flicker or a leaning or a compass pressing gently north. It was a mark on my left wrist burning silver white under my sleeve, and I knew it was there before I pushed the fabric back and looked at it, because I had felt a mate mark once before in my life, and there is no sensation like it. I pushed the sleeve back. There it was, not Myra's mark that had faded to a silver scar in the months after her death, which is what a mate mark does when the mate is gone. This was new. This was vivid. A tracery of something that looked like sound, like a waveform, like a phrase of music, wound twice around my wrist in light. The rehearsal was still going. She had not seen me. Aldrich looked at my wrist, then he looked at me. His expression was not the expression of a man who is surprised. It was the expression of a man who has been watching something happen for 6 days and has the decency not to say, "I told you so." "You knew," I said quietly, under the sound of 300 voices. "Your wolf knew on the first day," he said. The rest of you just needed the week. I did not tell her that night. I argued with myself about this. She had not seen it happen. The rehearsal had finished, and she had been surrounded immediately by singers with questions. And I had gone to my study and sat there with my wrist on the desk and looked at the mark and thought about the fact that she was hired for 7 days and the 7th day was tomorrow, and she had a life and a guild and a road she traveled, and none of it had anything to do with Ashenvale Hold. I thought about Myra. I thought about the 4 years of quiet in my chest and how I had stopped expecting anything to change. I thought about a woman in a gray corridor at dawn who said the land still knows what it's supposed to feel and did not look at me with careful, compensatory kindness. The bond did not think about any of this. The bond simply was what it was. The way north simply is north. I covered my wrist. I went asleep. In the morning the mark was still there and still vivid, and it had, if anything, grown slightly more elaborate in the night. The old records say that happens, that a new bond deepens as it settles. Myra's had done the same. I got dressed. I went to the Great Hall. The solstice rite begins at the 3rd hour after dawn. The full pack assembles, not just the voices, all 300 of us plus the beta families, the elder wolves, the pups in arms. The hall is lit with the old oil lamps, not the newer torches, because the old lamps burn a different color and the songs require the light to be warm. It is a full ceremony, 2 hours, 6 sequential song cycles, each one keyed to a different aspect of the territory. The songkeeper leads. The alpha stands beside her at the center. The pack responds. She found me before the rite, in the anteroom where I'd gone to straighten my dress cloak. She was in a deep gray dress, her best, I thought, which was still plain by the standard of the hall, with her hair back. And she looked, as she generally looked, like someone who was thinking about several things simultaneously and had not registered that the room had other people in it. She registered me. She started to say something about the 3rd song cycle, a technical point about the bass entry, and then she stopped. She looked at my face, which I'd thought was neutral and apparently wasn't. "Are you all right?" she said. "Yes," I said. She looked at me for another moment. Then she said carefully, "Has something happened?" I had planned to wait. I had planned to let the rite proceed and speak with her afterward privately, when there was time and she could process it, and give me an answer that was not under the weight of 300 witnesses. "There's something I need to show you," I said. "After the rite, it's important, but it will keep until then." She studied me the way she studied the walls, looking for what the space was telling her. "It's not bad." "I don't think so," I said. "I don't know what you'll think." She considered this. "All right," she said. "After," and she turned back toward the hall and the waiting pack. "I want to tell you what the rite felt like, because I think it is important, and because I did not expect to feel it the way I felt it. I have stood in that hall for every ceremony of my reign. I have stood at Myra's side for the ceremonies of our marriage years. I am not someone who is unacquainted with the weight of pack ritual, but I have never, not once, stood in the center of Ashenvale's great hall and felt the full solstice rite done properly. 3 generations of Caldenmere alphas had not managed it. The songs had been too broken. Ren began with the opening call. It is a single phrase, sustained, the first words of the oldest song cycle we have. I do not know how to render it in any alphabet that would convey what it meant for that sound to come from the center of the hall with the old lamps burning, and the full pack assembled, and the stone of Ashenvale, 400 years of it, stone that has heard kings and births and deaths and feuds, and everything the pack has been resonating around it. The pack answered. I felt it in my bones. I felt the territory, my territory, which I carry the way I carry my own heartbeat, respond. Not immediately. It rippled outward, the way sound ripples on still water. First the hall, then the hold's outer walls, then farther the moor edge, the fenlands, the eastern boundary where we'd been losing ground for 2 years to some misalignment we hadn't been able to name. One by one, the song cycles landed. Beside me, Ren moved through it all with the steadiness of someone who has done exactly this, in exactly this level of importance, and knows that the work requires the steadiness. She was not performing. She was doing. Her voice was the thread, and the pack followed it, and the land followed the pack, and the hold breathed. The fourth song cycle is the one that names the territory's heart. It is, as she had explained to me in the first days of rehearsal, the deepest of the old ones, the one that requires the most precision because it is doing the most real work, binding the alpha's blood to the land through sound. She had told me to be ready, that when it landed correctly I would feel it as a physical thing. She was right. The fourth cycle landed, and I felt my connection to the territory, which I feel always as a background, the way you feel your own feet on the ground snap into sudden clarity, the way eyes adjust when you move from dim light into bright. 40 years of ruling Ashenvale, and I had never felt it that clearly. I had not known there was more clarity to have. And in that moment of absolute, bell-clear connection to my land, my territory, my hold, my wolf rose up inside my chest, and the mark on my left wrist burned so intensely that I had to press my hand flat against my side to keep still. 299 pairs of eyes were on the songkeeper. One pair of eyes, my seconds, standing 3 rows back, was on me. The fifth cycle, the sixth. She held the thread through all of it, and the pack held with her, and by the time the final phrase of the final cycle landed, the hall was so full of resonance that the air seemed to hum. Then silence. The kind of silence that is the opposite of empty, the kind that is so full it takes a moment to realize no sound is in it. Ren let out a slow breath. The tension she'd been holding, professional tension, the tension of a craftsman doing difficult work well, left her shoulders. She turned to me and said quietly, "The East." "I felt it," I said. She nodded. "It'll take 3 or 4 years to fully stabilize, but the correction is in. The songs will hold it." She was speaking to me as a professional informing her client, and I could see the beginning of the shift in her, the slight movement toward the conclusion that the work was done. 7 days. 8th day was the road. I took hold of that thought and set it aside. "Songkeeper Ren," I said, in a voice I did not intend to be quite as quiet as it came out, "I owe you something." The pack, 300 of them around us, still in the formation, had not moved. Aldrich, I noted from the edge of my vision, was making no move to dismiss them. I pushed back my left sleeve. The mark was vivid in the lamplight. The waveform tracery, the silver-white pattern that curved twice around my wrist, it was impossible to misread. Every wolf in the Caldenmere pack knew what a mate mark looked like. Every wolf in the hall went still. Ren looked at my wrist. She was quiet for a moment. When she looked up, her expression was careful, not cold, careful, like someone who is holding several large things at once and is trying not to drop any of them. "That's new," she said. 6 days old, I said. "It appeared when I was. When you sang the first line in the courtyard," I said. "I didn't see it until day 6, but my wolf knew on the first day." She absorbed this, "And you're telling me now because—" "Because it's yours," I said, "if you want it to be." Very quiet, the hall was so quiet. 300 wolves, and outside the moor, and the hold around us settling into the deep resonance of a proper rite, and all of it waiting. She said, "I don't have pack blood." "I know. I don't have a territory, I travel." "I know. The guild might need me. I have a contract in the north in the spring." "I know," I said. "These are all things we can discuss. I'm not asking you to decide everything right now. I'm asking you to know that the mark is there and that I know what it means and that it is yours if you choose it." She looked at me, she looked at my wrist, she looked at me again. Then she said slowly, "How long has your wolf been waiting?" 4 years, I said. And then 6 days without any patience at all. Something moved through her face, something that was not quite a smile but was in the same country as one. She was quiet for another moment, and I held still, because I meant what I'd said. The choice was hers. I was done choosing for her or for myself. 4 years of quiet and 6 days of a compass that knew exactly where to point, and all of it came down to this. A songkeeper with her traveling pack somewhere behind the hall and 300 wolves holding a collective breath. She raised her right hand, slowly, and she pressed her palm to my left wrist over the mark. What I felt I will not try to make into language. Some things are not meant to go through translation. My wolf went not still, not the absence of 4 years, somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that was warm and completely certain and very, very old, the way the songs are old. The mark under her hand burned silver and then settled. The pack, 300 wolves, the elders and the betas and the pups in arms, old Torv who had stood to her left all week, did not bow exactly. It was more like the collective sound a hall makes when the right note finally lands, a long breath released. Wren's hand was still on my wrist. She looked at the mark, which was, I noticed, beginning to faintly trace itself on her own wrist in mirror, and she said very quietly, "I have a contract in the north." "I know," I said. "We'd have to work something out." "We will. I'm not very good at sitting still in one place." "Neither am I said, "but this is a good place to come home to." She considered this with the specific quality of attention she gave to everything, the walls, the songs, the stone of the hold. She looked at me the same way. "It is," she said. "I noticed that when I first sang in the courtyard." "The echo," I said. "The echo," she said. The hold answered, a pause. "That doesn't always happen." Around us the hall was beginning slowly to breathe normally again. The lamps were warm. The rite had settled into the stone. Somewhere outside, across the moor, I felt the territorial boundary, clear, deep, present in a way it had not been in 3 years, holding steady. "Stay for a while," I said. "As long as you need to decide, longer." "You'll let me go," she said, "if I decide I need the road." "I will," I said, and I meant it, "but I will also be here when the road brings you back." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your wolf really sat up when I sang 4 words in the courtyard." "He did." "And you spent 6 days pretending he hadn't." "Extensively," I said. The not-quite smile landed fully. It changed her face in a way I had been catching at the edges all week, half-glimpsed. It was a warm and slightly disruptive thing, that smile, and it was aimed entirely at me, and my wolf, who had endured 4 years of stillness and 6 days of dignified restraint, settled into something that was the opposite of either. Something that had no word except right. "All right," she said simply. That was enough. That was everything. I will not tell you she stayed without reservation, because that would not be true and she would not want me to tell it that way. She had a contract in the north, and she honored it. She was gone 2 months. She came back, and the hold welcomed her the way the hold welcomes things that belong to it. The mark on her wrist was fully formed by the time she returned, the same waveform pattern as mine, as though the bond had waited patiently and finished its work in her absence. The guild, as it turned out, had been waiting for decades for a songkeeper who had found a hold where the work was deep and ongoing. Ashenvale was, Wren informed me, a significant project. The songs would need tending for years. They sent her a formal letter of reassignment that she accepted with the equanimity of someone who had, perhaps, seen it coming. She is in the hall most mornings or out on the moor, listening for what the land is saying. I find reasons to be wherever she is, which is a habit I have made no effort to break. Aldrich finds this quietly satisfying in a way he tries, and fails, to conceal. Drest, who has read every record we have of bonds that formed outside the pack, has presented me with 3 separate historical essays on the subject, apparently as a form of congratulation. Old Torv, who was her most resistant student, goes to the morning sessions willingly now. He has told me twice that the songs sound right in a way they hadn't in his lifetime. He has not told me that he is glad she stayed, but he has started positioning himself again directly to her left in the formation. It means the same thing. The territorial boundary held through the winter. The moor is green where it had begun to gray. The eastern disputes have quieted, not all at once, not without work, but there is a steadiness in the land that was absent before. The songs do real work. She was right about that. She is right about most things, and she does not point this out, which is a quality I find in her daily and cannot overstate. There are mornings when I stand in the upper gallery, where I first saw her test the echo of the courtyard, and I think about what it means that a wolf can be silent for 4 years and still know, in 4 words, what he is looking for. I think the answer is simply that the right thing sounds like the right thing. She sang 4 words in a courtyard at dawn, and the hold answered, and my wolf, patient, obstinate, entirely certain, answered too. He has not been quiet since. I have no complaints about that, not one.